Welcome to Miss Retro Reads, conclusion of Beau Geste. An End to Wandering. I could fill a volume with the account of our adventure on this ride that began at Zandernoof and ended for some of us at Kano in Nigeria. We rode southwest when we could, and northeast when we must, as when north of Air we were captured by Tuaregs on their way to the border of Morocco. However, the upshot of this particular incident was all for the best. In making our escape, we not only secured ourselves 4 splendid Mari camels, but also 4 splendid Tuareg costumes. We soon got used to the baggy trousers and even the blue veils that only Tuaregs wear. In fact, we went native altogether, retaining only our rifles and Digby's trumpet. Even in the rifles we were not guilty of anomaly, for, along with heavy crusade swords and lances of a type unchanged since the days of Abraham, the Tuaregs carried rifles of the latest pattern. Anyway, having become a desperate band of ruffians, we found ourselves far less open to attack by having passed Arab band, and we were less likely to be recognized if pursued from Zandernoof. During one terrible year of our travels, we made an almost complete circle, being once within 200 miles of Timbuktu, and later within the same distance of Lake Chad. Sometimes thirst and hunger drove us to join salt or slave caravans, even though they were generally going in the opposite direction to ours. Sometimes we were haunted by gangs of larger than ours. Sometimes we were met at villages with rifle fire, being taken naturally for what we pretended to be. Sometimes we reached an oasis, only to find it occupied by French, far more dangerous to us than nomadic robbers. We went to the place where Europeans had never been before, and of course we could never have survived but for the desert skill of Hank and Buddy, though the ready wits of Digby and our knowledge of Arabic often saved the situation when we were in contact with our fellowmen. At last we found ourselves paralleling a caravan route towards Nigeria, but it was then that after a month of travel in good heart and high hopes, when we were only 400 miles from safety, we fell into the hands of the treacherous Tegama Sultan of Agadez. Although we bluffed our way to freedom by telling him that we were mischief makers from the north, bent upon raising the desert tribes against the French, our rifles were confiscated. It was their loss which precipitated our ultimate destruction. A couple of days after escaping the Sultan's clutches, we were riding in a long line abreast and scouting for signs of human beings of water. Both our water skins and food bags were nearly empty. Hank was on the right of the line, I next to him, and half a mile away, having Buddy on my left, with Digby on the far end, cut off from view behind some rocks. Looking to my right, I saw Hank, topping a little undulation, suddenly wheeled toward me, urging his camel to top speed. As I looked, a crowd of riders swarmed over the skyline. 2 or 3 of them, halting their camels, opened fire. "Dismount and form square," yelled Hank, and we 3 brought our camels to their knees, made a pretense of getting our rifles from under the saddles, leveled our sticks as though they were guns across the backs of the animals, and awaited death. "This is war we gets what's comin' to us," said Buddy. The band Hogger or Tibu robbers, by the looks of them, bore down with yells. I could have wept that we had no rifles. Steady magazine fire would have brought the yelling fiends crashing to earth and provide us with much that we sorely needed. The feeling of utter impotence was horrible. Could Digby escape, or would they see his tracks and follow him after slaughtering us? Would they swerve from our apparent leveled rifles? No. On they came. And then from somewhere rang out a bugle call. That portentous bugle call that had been the last sound so many tribesmen had heard. The call that announced the closing of the trap and the hail of bullets against which no Arab could prevail. As the bugle died away, Hank roared orders in French to the top of his voice, and away to the left a man was apparently signaling back to the French forces behind him. The effect was magical. The band swerved to their right, wheeled and fled to avoid what they thought a terrible trap. Evidently they imagined that the danger was somewhere behind Hank, for they fled past the rocks behind which Digby had blown his bugle. Suddenly my heart leapt into my throat as one of the robbers swerved to the left, and either in a spirit of vengeance or of naivete, desire for single combat, rode at the man who had exposed himself to signal the French force. "Quick!" I shouted. "He'll get him!" And I found myself yelling Digby's name. We scrambled onto our camels, Hank bawling commands in French. Digby stooped, then poised himself like a javelin thrower. As the Arab raised his sword, Digby's arm shot forward, and the Arab received the stone full in his face. As the man reeled, Digby sprang at his leg and pulled him down, the two falling together. They rose simultaneously. The Arab's sword went up. Digby's fist shot out, and we heard the smack as the man fell backward. His sword dropping from his hand, Digby seized it and stood over the robber, who was clawing at the sand. Then we heard another sound. A rifle was fired, and Digby swayed and fell. An Arab had wheeled from the tail of the fleeing band and fired a shot at 30 yards range and fled again. Digby was dead before I got to him, shot through the back of the head with an expanding bullet. We tied the fallen Arab's feet and then buried Digby. "He sure gave his life for ourn," said Hank, chewing his lips as he stood over the grave. Buddy said nothing, but Buddy wept. I will say little about my feelings. Digby was dead. Michael was dead. I felt that the essential me had died too. I felt like an automaton, a creature sentenced to death, awaiting for the blow to fall. When we moved on, we took the Arab with us and left him at the first water hole to which we came. From there we rode on with filled water-skins, but Digby's death proved to be the first of a series of disasters that now overtook us. First we encountered a sandstorm that nearly killed us and obliterated all tracks. We missed the caravan route to Kano. Next, nearly dead with thirst, we reached a waterhole and found it dried up. Here our starving camels ate some poisonous shrub, sickened, and within 36 hours were dead. We thus found ourselves lost in the desert, without rifles, food, camels, with one goatskin containing about a pint of water. This we decided not to drink until we must literally drink or die. For a day we struggled on incredibly without water. At the end, wondered whether we were not a day's march farther from the caravan road on which were waterholes and villages. Night found us unable to speak, our lips black and cracked, our tongues swollen horribly, our throats closed. Our mouths were like hard leather, yet on we reeled. Towards morning, I could go no farther and sank down. I tried to rise and failed. Seeing that I could do no more, the other two lay beside me, and we fell asleep. The sun woke me to see Buddy, with a face like death, staring at a scrap of paper torn from a pocketbook. He passed it to me. On it was scrawled, "Pards, drink the water slow and push on quick. Buddy, we been good pards. Hank." Hank was gone, Buddy untied the goatskin, filled his mouth with water, and then swallowed slowly. "Take a mouthful like that, then swaller," he croaked. "We don't want to make what he done all for nix, and he won't come back and drink it." I filled my mouth and swallowed, but I could not swallow the lump in my throat. We staggered on, moistening our mouths at intervals, and just before sunset on the second day saw a mirage of palms, a village, a mosque, and the mirage was real. We stayed at that village for months, scouring the desert for Hank, working as water carrier, camelman, at any other job that was offered, and we were never both asleep at the same time. We stayed at that village for months, scouring the desert for Hank, working as water carriers, camelmen, and at any other job that was offered, and we were never both asleep at the same time. When French patrols visited the place, we hid, with the sympathy of the villagers. We could have joined more than one southbound caravan, but I would not urge Buddy to leave. He had absolute faith in the indestructibility of Hank. At first it was, "He'll come mushin' in here tomorrow," or a throwin' his feet like the big buck hobo, and grinnin' ter bust. Then it was, "Nobody'd kill Hank. He's what you call indestructible." And at last, "Well, you can't stop here for keeps," he said. "I reckon I been selfish, but I couldn't leave Hank while there was a chance." Had it not been for Michael's letter and my longing to see Isabel, I would have continued to urge Buddy to stay, for that was what he really wanted to do. But we joined a caravan headed south towards Zinder, headquarters of the Territoire Militaire, and left it just before it reached its destination, in case some non-com there might recognize us. Our adventures between Zinder and the British border were numerous, and our hardships greater. But now that I had lost Digby and Buddy had lost Hank, and neither of us cared much what happened, things went fairly well, and one day we rode on miserable donkeys into the city of Kano, and I revealed myself to an astounded Englishman as a compatriot. He was kindness itself, and put me in communication with a friend of Aunt Patricia's, a Mr. Lawrence of the Nigerian Civil Service. This gentleman sent me money and an invitation to stay with him at his headquarters and to bring Buddy with me. But when I told Buddy that on the morrow he was going to ride in a train once more, I found that he was not. Having seen me safe to Kano, he was going back to look for Hank. Nothing would shake his determination, and it was a waste of words to try, nor was it pleasant to strive to persuade him that his friend was dead. "Would you go if it was your brother that was lost?" he said. All I could do was to see him fitted out with 2 fine camels, food, water, ammunition, and a small tent, and a Hausa guide recommended by the Kano Englishman. The latter accepted my word that I would repay him for these kindnesses as soon as I saw Mr. Lawrence. I hated parting with the brave, staunch little Buddy, and I wondered if I should ever have had the courage to go back into that hell on such a ghost of a chance of finding a friend. At Kano I took the train to some place of which I have forgotten the name, and Lawrence met me on the platform. I vaguely remember him as quiet, rather dour man, whom I had seen 2 or 3 times at Brandon and Bass. He came nearer to show excitement while he listened to my story that I thought was his wont. When I had finished, he said, "And you still do not know the rights of this blue water mystery?" "No, I only know that my brother Michael never stole it." "Quite so," he replied. "And now I have something to tell you. Your Major de Beaujolais has told me the whole story of Zandernoof from his side, and about finding your brother's confession, I went on to Brandon Abbas and told Lady Brandon, but it really did not seem to interest her enormously. It was incredible to sit here in a hammock chair under the African stars outside this man's tent, a whiskey and soda in my hand and a cheroot in my mouth, and hear him tell how he had taken our Zandernoof story to Brandon Abbas. But what struck me more was his account of how Aunt Patricia had received his news. Apparently, she did not even want to get that wretched jewel back. Lawrence gave me much Brandon Abbas news. Sir Hector Brandon had died miserably of cholera in Kashmir. Claudia had married one of the richest men in England, nearly old enough to be her grandfather. Augustus, always a poor horseman, had fallen off his hunter and been dragged until dead. Isabel was quite well. No, she had not married. I was conscious that my heart now functioned more regularly than it had done since the mention of Claudia's marriage. Mr. Lawrence had heard from Lady Brandon only a month or so ago. She wrote more frequently nowadays. And Aunt Patricia knew, yet what did she know after all? Merely that Michael professed to be the thief of the blue water, and that he, and he alone, was to blame. But did she yet know the truth? I had been feeling horribly ill for some time, with a combination of malaria, fever, and dysentery. That ill-omened union, after whose attack a man is never quite the same again. Now I collapsed altogether. Had I been Lawrence's own son, he could not have done more for me. And though it was a long, slow recovery, the day came at last when I found myself weak and emaciated, en route for home. George Lawrence was with me, having sworn to deliver me safe and sound at Brandon Abbas. I put aside the unworthy thought that it was himself he yearned to see safe and sound at that house. But I could not help noticing that whatever I said interested him only to the extent that it bore upon Aunt Patricia. And so, one day, I found myself on the deck of a steamer breathing glorious sea air and looking back upon the receding coast of Africa. My eyes watered as I realized that I was leaving behind me all that was mortal of two of the finest men that ever lived, my brothers, Michael and Digby. Also two of the finest men of a different kind, Hank and Buddy, who, since no word had come from Kano, were probably dead also. But for Isabel, I should have wished that I were dead too. Instead, I was glad to be alive, and in my selfishness I let my joy lay balm upon my grief, for in my pocket were cables from Isabel, cables dispatched as soon as Lawrence's letter reached Brandon Abbas announcing my appearance in Nigeria. I will not write of my meeting with her. Those who have loved can imagine something of what I felt as I walked to the Bower, which she had elected to be our meeting place rather than a railway platform, and found her more beautiful than ever, if possible, more sweet and loving. Joy does not kill, or I should not have survived that hour. At first Aunt Patricia was only coldly kind. I was made to feel that she had not forgotten me for the day I had left her house against her expressed desires. After lunch, as we were sitting in the drawing-room, the room from which the blue water had disappeared, I gave her the letter and packet. She opened the letter first, read it, and then read aloud in a clear, steady voice. My most dear and admired Aunt Patricia, when you get this, I shall be dead, and when you have read it, I shall be forgiven, I hope, for I did what I thought was best, and what would, in a small measure, repay you for some of your great goodness to me and my brothers. My dear aunt, I know you had sold the blue water to the Maharaja for the benefit of the tenants of the estate. I know you must dread the return of Sir Hector and his discovery of the fact sooner or later. I was inside one of the suits of armor when you handed the blue water over to the agent of the Maharaja. I heard everything, and when once you had said what you said and I had heard it, and it was pointless for me to confess that I knew. But when I found that you had had a duplicate made, I thought what a splendid thing it would be if only we had a burglary and the blue water substitute were stolen. The thieves would be nicely down in the eye, and your sale of the stone would never be discovered by Sir Hector. Had I known how to get into the priest's hole and open the safe, I would have burgled it for you. Then Sir Hector's letter came announcing his return, and I knew that things were desperate and the matter urgent, so I spirited away that clever piece of glass or quartz or whatever it is, and herein return it with apologies. I nearly put it back after all the same night, but I'm glad I didn't. Tell John this. Now I do beg and pray you to let Sir Hector go on thinking I am a common thief and stole the blue water, or all this bother that everybody has had will be all for nothing, and I shall have failed to shield you from trouble and annoyance. If it is not important, may I say that I think you were absolutely right to sell it, and that the value is a jolly sight better applied to the health and happiness of the tenants and villagers, to the productiveness of the farms, than locked up in a safe in the form of a shining stone that is of no earthly benefit to anyone. It nearly made me regret that I had done when those boys Digby and John had cheek to bolt too. Honestly, it never occurred to me that they would do anything so silly. I suppose it is selfish of me to want all the blame and all the fun and pleasure of doing a little job for you. I do so hope that all has gone well and turned out as I planned. I bet Uncle Hector was sick. Well, my dear aunt, I can only pray that I have helped you a little, with sincerest gratitude for all you have done for us. Your loving and admiring nephew, Beau Geste. Ah, Beau Geste, indeed, said Aunt Patricia, and for the only time in my life I saw her put a handkerchief to her eyes. Extract from a letter from George Lawrence, Esquire, C.M.G. of His Majesty's Nigerian Civil Service to Henry de Beaujolais, Colonel of Space, African Army Corps. And so that is the other side of the story, my friend. Alas for those two splendid boys, Michael and Digby Geste. And the remaining news is that I do most sincerely hope that you will be able to come over to England in June. You are the best man I know, jolly, and I want you to be my best man, a desire heartily shared by Lady Brandon. Fancy old Cabbage, after more than 30 years of devotion, I feel like a boy, and that fine boy John is going to marry the oh-so-beautiful child whom you remembered. Lady Brandon is being a fairy godmother to them indeed. I think she feels she is somehow doing something for Michael by soothing their path so. The end. The man who wrote Beau Geste once served with the Foreign Legion himself. Percival Christopher Wren was born in Devonshire, England, a descendant of Sir Christopher Wren, who designed St. Paul's Cathedral. After attending Oxford, he spent 5 years in travel, working his way as sailor, tramp, schoolmaster, journalist, farm laborer, explorer, hunter, and even as a vegetable vendor in the slums of London. Eventually, chance took him to India, where he remained for 10 years, and it was here he started writing Beau Geste. Was published in 1924, and it was an instant runaway success, first as a book and then as a play and finally as a film. Although Wren wrote approximately 40 books, he is known and loved principally for those like Beau Sabreur, which also deals with the adventure of the Geste family. He died in 1941. I hope you have enjoyed this story. I've always liked it since I heard it when I was a young girl. I really enjoyed the fact that they were so brave. It kind of reminds me of another story called Gunga Din. I saw a movie about that once. The desert adventures, the swashbucklingness of it. But I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll try and read another adventure story on Friday or Saturday. Thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.